Welcome to the gift of being home. I'm Ann Lovely, CEO of Coastal Hospice, and for years, we've had the privilege of walking alongside families here on the Lower Eastern Shore during some of life's most sacred and vulnerable moments. And one thing we hear over and over again is this: we wish we had known sooner. Hospice is often misunderstood. Families wait too long. Caregivers feel like they're doing it all alone, and fear can take the place of understanding. So we created this space. For 46 years, our community has trusted Coastal Hospice to provide comfort, dignity, and support at the end of life. And this podcast is just an extension of that. We're here to talk honestly about what hospice really is, when to call, and how to care for someone you love with more confidence and peace. We'll walk through things like when hospice is appropriate, what the final days can look like, how to manage pain without fear, and how to support caregivers along the way. Whether you're caring for someone, referring patients, or just trying to understand more, this is a place for clarity and compassion. Because being home isn't just a place, it's about comfort, peace, and love. I'm really glad you're here.
Hi everyone, we're so glad you're tuning in today. We're going to be diving into a topic that sometimes feels a little bit confusing for people, but it is so important for patients and families to understand: hospice eligibility and what that really means. I'm really excited to be joined by Lauren Blair. Lauren is the Director of Business Development here at Coastal Hospice, and she brings so much knowledge and experience when it comes to helping families navigate these decisions. Lauren, thank you so much for being here today. Can you start by helping us understand at that high level what hospice eligibility actually means?
Absolutely, yes, and thanks for having me today. At a high level, hospice eligibility really just means that a patient meets certain clinical criteria in order to be able to receive care that's focused on comfort and quality of life rather than curative treatment. Typically, it involves a physician determining that based on the patient's illness and overall condition, they may be in the last phase of life. They're generally considered to be 6 months or less if the disease follows its usual course. But just as important, it also means that the patient and family are choosing a care approach that prioritizes symptom management, dignity, and support. So eligibility really is a combination of medical assessment and personal goals, making sure that the care plan aligns with what matters the most to the patient at that point in their journey.
Okay, that's really helpful. I think one of the biggest things people hear a lot is that 6-month time frame. Can you explain what that actually means for patients and families?
Absolutely. That's a great question because this 6-month guideline is really often misunderstood. It's not a countdown, it's a clinical assessment. So what it means is that based on the patient's condition and the disease trajectory, a physician believes that the patient may have 6 months or less to live if the illness follows its expected course. It's really about eligibility for the hospice benefit, not a prediction of exactly how long someone will live. And I think that's something that people kind of get hung up on and confused about. Some patients may decline more quickly, but others may live longer. And it's really just an estimate used to ensure that patients can access the right type of care at the right time.
Okay, that definitely puts things into perspective because I was wondering, is it like a timeline set in stone, or can patients continue to receive hospice care beyond that point?
Yeah, that's a key point. It's not set in stone. Hospice care can absolutely continue beyond the 6 months as long as the patient continues to meet that eligibility criteria. Patients are regularly assessed, and if they're still showing signs of decline related to their illness, they can be recertified for ongoing hospice care. So rather than a fixed deadline, it's more of an ongoing evaluation process that ensures that care remains appropriate for the patient's needs at that time.
That's such a great point. Now, have you seen situations where patients actually improve with hospice support?
Absolutely, all the time, yes. And it does happen so much more often than people might expect. When patients receive consistent symptom management and emotional support and relief from the stress of aggressive treatments, they sometimes stabilize or even improve. It's kind of the first time that someone has looked at these patients holistically, wherein, we may have a cardiologist, we may have a pulmonologist, and we have our primary care, and everyone's giving a whole bunch of different medications and not really necessarily looking at the patient as a whole. So now with hospice, they have a physician that's looking at everything going on with them, as well as the nurse and the nurse's aide to help out with all those things. And sometimes that can improve patients. People are always kind of shocked when they see that, maybe someone has been on a blood pressure medication for years and years, and we take something like that small away because they don't need it anymore, and then they perk up. So it's really great to see that, and to be able to have, to have that, and to show people, hospice doesn't necessarily mean, you're going to pass away right away. Better pain control, improved nutrition, or reduced anxiety can make a meaningful difference in how someone can feel day to day. Even just having the emotional support from our social workers and our spiritual care can really help people to kind of live a better life. And we really try to create an environment focused on that comfort and the support. And in some cases, that allows patients to regain a bit of strength or stability.
I think when I'm out in the community a lot, people are very surprised when I tell people that they can improve and they could get better, because I think sometimes people think that they are giving up on their loved one, and it's kind of like the end all be all. Now, can you tell me a little bit about what it may look like if a patient no longer meets eligibility, and then what happens after that?
Yeah, sure. That's an important part of the conversation. So if we have a patient that improves or stabilizes to the point where they no longer meet those hospice eligibility requirements, they can be discharged from hospice care. And we call that graduating from hospice. And it happens so much more often than you think, because again, patients can do better. Now they have someone coming in reminding them to take their medicine every day. They have somebody coming in and maybe just giving them some emotional support, or making sure that their symptoms are managed and helping them to stay out of the hospital. So all of those things can, again, really help people to be able to graduate from hospice to the point where maybe a physician doesn't feel like they meet that criteria anymore. And at that point, it doesn't mean that they're abandoned in any way. It just means that their care needs have shifted. So the hospice team helps them to create a transition plan, and that might be returning to standard medical care, or connecting with community resources, or they may even re-enroll in hospice later on if their condition changes again. So it's really about matching the level of care to where the patients are at that moment.
I feel like that can probably bring a lot of hope for people hearing this today. I mean, I think it's very encouraging to hear. For families who are waiting for a very specific timeline or right moment, what would you want them to understand about when to consider even calling hospice?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say another big misconception is that there's this perfect moment to call hospice. And in reality, earlier is often better. We hear that all the time. I wish I had called hospice sooner. I wish that I had not been so scared of that H word, hospice, and just called them and found out what was really all about. So families don't need to wait until people are in their final days or weeks. If someone's experiencing frequent hospitalizations or increased symptoms or just a noticeable decline in function, that's a good time to at least have the conversation. And that's what we really encourage, is people to have that conversation earlier than later, because even if you don't need hospice necessarily right now, it's better to know about it before you need it. And it's better just to have all of that knowledge, and it's a lot less scary when you're not in crisis mode. So I just encourage people to really educate themselves about hospice and what it really means. And so that way maybe, you're more comfortable with that, because we do hear that all the time. I wish that, that my loved one would have come on sooner and we could have gotten all this support. And we also, of course, have our bereavement support, who can provide that grief support to our patients' families. And even if someone hasn't passed away yet, they're able to kind of provide that pre-grief support where you're anticipating, and we call that anticipatory grief. So having all those people in it's just so helpful to families. And hospice can provide support so much sooner than people realize. And getting that support in place earlier often leads to a better quality of life for both patients and their loved ones.
I definitely totally agree with you. And this has really been such a valuable conversation and such an important reminder that hospice eligibility isn't about a strict countdown. It's really about meeting patients where they are and making sure they have the support they need. It's also about reassuring to hear that you can continue as long as it's appropriate and that some patients may even improve with that added extra layer of support with everyone. Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time to break this down for us today and make it feel more clear to everyone and approachable to all of us that's listening today. And thank you to everyone who has joined us. We're so glad you spent your day with us, and we hope this conversation has been helpful and has answered some questions that maybe you have been asking yourself, and to really put into perspective a little bit more about hospice eligibility. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.